morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I'm your co-host, Hugh David.
And I'm Dev, and on today's show, we're going to be looking at minute 40, where Paul is smoking a spliff and learning what Martin does for a living.
And joining us on his final episode this week with us, and he's been with us all week, is David Brook of Blueprint Review and DCB Productions. David, hello again.
Hello, yeah, it's been a pleasure to do this whole week with you guys.
It's been good fun. Now, would you like to tell people what you actually do for a living? Because obviously you are connected to the movie business in various ways on TV and so forth.
Yeah, I do. I've been working in video production for a long time, and I've been gradually delving more into films, which is great. Recently, I've been doing a lot of work for a company called Bazooka Bunny, and we've been. I tend to focus on editing these days, but I've done a bit of camera work and all sorts of bits and pieces in the past. But tend to be editing. I've edited a few feature films, a TV series, and loads of short films and corporate videos and all this kind of jazz.
Fantastic.
So yeah, good times. Yeah, it's good fun. I do enjoy my job a lot. Mm-hmm. And away from work, is my Blueprint Review side of things. It's a website I've been running for a long time. Is it? I don't know, 12 years, 13 years, or something like that. And no, it must be longer. 14 years, I think now.
Wow.
And it's gone from strength to strength. It's not just me. I kind of run the site, but I have a pool of writers, and we tend to focus on the boutique kind of Blu-ray, UHD kind of DVD kind of side of things. Mm-hmm. So looking at the special features as well as the films themselves, and we tend to focus on indie, classic, world cinema, that kind of stuff. We don't do a huge amount of the sort of mainstream cinema releases. Occasionally, when one of the writers feels like it, will pop it in. I'm a bit of an everything goes guy, but I think naturally this site is focused because we've got a lot of good contacts with the boutique labels, so we do tend to cover mainly just the UK ones. Although Imprint send us things from Australia occasionally.
They know. Well, it's PAL, isn't it? They know that they even. The region B will be fine over here.
Yeah, so yeah, that's really my thing. I'm huge on kind of the kind of glossy remasters and loads of special features of classic movies. Like we were saying earlier, how I don't listen to enough podcasts, but it's because I review so many of these discs. What I've realized, because I never have time to sit and watch every commentary and all that in my living room. So what I actually do is I just got a Blu-ray drive, and I rip the films off there, and I always watch the film properly on I've got a projector. I like to do it proper cinema style, but all the special features, commentaries, I just listen to them. I put them on my phone, and then I can listen while I'm doing the washing up, while I'm on it in the car having a drive. That's how I get through the mountains of special features that I've got to get through. But it stops me from listening to much else. Like I love music, and I don't listen to as much as I'd like to because I'm always I've got some film critic babbling on my ears all the time. But I love it.
Having been in that business at the other end, and I'm just looking at your website now and realizing you were reviewing that website was reviewing stuff when I was still in the business for quite some time, and I'm just wondering if I ever sent you anything. I mean, I've just found the review of Thirst, which you did in July 2010.
No, hold on, I'm about to say you're dredging up some old reviews. They're probably not that great, but
well, no, but that's the disc I sent out. I mean, I did that. Wow. That was one of my last big marketing jobs at Tartan, so which is just ironic as all get out. But your point about listening to stuff is actually quite interesting, because here we are doing movie by minutes, and obviously movie by minutes has become quite a thing. And when Dev put me onto it, you're saying, there's a lot of people who do this, there's a community, there's people who listen, and of course I hadn't listened to it, but one of the reasons I hadn't is because, like yourself, I find over the years I've had to juggle stuff for work versus stuff for myself. There was a point where I wasn't listening to music on the train into London when I worked at Network, because I was having to watch film licenses ripped, and I would rip them off the screener, just put it on my phone, and watch it on my phone on the way in, because the phone was a work phone, so I could legitimately put it on there. And because the boss had given me like 6 days and he wanted opinions on 5 films, and it's like, you just don't have the time to watch those films when you're commuting back and forth. And like yourself, someone's reviewed a disc, I better listen to the podcast and see what they said in case there's something we can use and put on the website. And it does take over, and you have to kind of, for your own sanity, start to figure out where the line is drawn and what you listen to instead. And so, having done a lot of podcasts until a couple of years ago, I was kind of not listening to that many. And so coming back and doing this has been very much about not just coming back into the podcast world, but also noticing how things have changed and who listens to what and how.
Yeah.
This feels to me, I mean, Dev, you can tell me if I'm wrong, because you commute for much longer distances and longer times than I've ever done here. And I think, I feel like Movie by Minutes is very good for people with short distances.
Yeah. I mean, I think podcasts for the most part have kind of evolved to this natural place of like 30-minute max episodes for most subjects, right? You look at kind of New York Times is the Daily, you look at Planet Money for economics, like, a lot of those highbrow podcasts, but also like Movies by Minute podcasts tend to naturally fall out that like 20 to 30-minute window. That slightly older form of the super long podcast that would run 3+ hours often, that you used to get, I feel like that has kind of decayed because people aren't getting through a whole episode. They're having to listen to part of an episode, and they still exist, right? I listened to one called The Independent Characters that's, I can't remember, an episode less than 2 hours long. But I can't say that I look forward to that one as much, because I do have to think about when I'm going to set aside the time to listen to it. And I think for a lot of people, extras on Blu-ray, on UHD, falls into that same bucket, right? It's like, I want to sit down and I want to watch it, but do I then watch the movie? Do I watch the movie twice and the second time with commentary? Do I actually sit through all of those special features? Right? For me, if I'm sitting down to watch something, I know my wife is going to take at least half an hour to actually get to the point where she's sat down and ready to watch it. So I've got that time to watch all of those extras. I'm safe to say this because she's out of the house today. She's not in the background.
Yeah, she's not going to watch this later.
No. No way is that happening. But then, like, there's
welcome
the payoff,
to
right?
therapy for Dev.
I have to front load the extras, right? I watch them ahead of the movie oftentimes, and if I've not seen the movie before, like that's an odd choice. But
I do think sometimes there can be a balance as well. I think, especially because the boutique, weirdly, although kind of everyone talks about streaming taking over, the boutique Blu-ray market is actually booming. Like standard kind of everyday DVDs, Blu-rays, and stuff, they're definitely dying. But there's a real boom in the. But I think because of that, sometimes some of the labels compete too hard and think that more extras equals a better disc. But I don't think that's always the case. Like sometimes they put the weight, like you say, people don't have time to watch that much. You'll get one film with like 10 hours worth of extras. It's like, why? It's like you're just going to talk about the same things again and again and again. So it's getting that balance right. I do love a good special feature, but sometimes, like I think one example, I don't want to badmouth it because I thought it was a good disc and a great film, but the BFI put out Targets recently, and that it was a good disc, but there was a lot of repetition of the same anecdotes. Like I heard about 5 times about how the film was, how Roger Corman funded the film and things, and I do think some of these companies need to kind of think less is more and just go for quality over quantity.
I think Lord of the Rings is like the king of this one, right? Like that's a lot of extras, and a lot of it has got quite a lot of value, but there's a huge amount of repetition there, and there's a lot of that kind of thing. But it also somewhat set those expectations of huge quantities of extras on stuff. But also, streaming has more limitations than I think people are currently recognizing. And we talked about that earlier this week, right? We talked about, streaming not necessarily being perennially available. You're renting something if it's on offer. You're not owning it. But beyond even that, right? Like UHD and 4K these days is generally a better quality image than you're going to get through streaming, right?
Yeah,
And
it doesn't have that compression. It's that's what people don't always realize. They think of the resolution, but it's not. There's more to it than that. Like it might say 4K on Netflix, whatever, but it's so heavily compressed. It is not the same thing at all. Especially sound is a big difference as well.
Yeah,
no, absolutely.
Yeah. I think for a lot of us that are those hardcore film buffs, we're always going to value that physical media. And it's in my head initially I was thinking of an analogy to vinyl, and the warmth of sound that you get from vinyl versus CD or just streaming it online. But I don't think it is quite the same analogy
it's not.
Like the original that physical media is actually straight up outperforming.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing: if you are okay, so I know I don't want to get too far off track because obviously we've got a podcast to do here, guys. But this is interesting stuff, right? This is genuinely interesting stuff, and I think this plays into part of the argument as to why we still don't have a good edition of Grosse Pointe Blank in home video. One thing I was going to say, by the way, Dev wants me to promote our podcast. The guy who produced the Targets disc is a mate of mine, so I'm going to have to be careful. Don't get me wrong, he can take criticism, it's fine. But I've known him for a very long time. But I think you're right. I think it is an issue. I think knowing when quality over quantity has never been the watchword of the home video industry by far. And one of the things about 4K UHD remastering for just generally, even if you're just doing a good new 2K remaster for Blu-ray, the thing about all this stuff is the general public don't care. They just want to see something clean and neat and colourful. Most of them don't even know how to set their own TVs properly, so they're running these weird motion flow things and whatnot that make everything look like 90s soap opera video. So ultimately it is just down to a few of us, and it's the same in music in that sense, where only the people who care about music and how it sounds will have their choices. Some will care about vinyl, some will still be quite happy with CD or what have you. Some will be like, I'm happy to rip it as long as I rip it to a lossless format. There's all these things about what is sound and how does it work. Film, it'll always be like that. For some of us, we will know and understand the technical side sufficiently to understand why the experience we're having while we absorb the media is not the way we remember it, the way we think it should be, the way we want it to be. And I think for me, the way I used to, when I worked in DVD, going back to when Dev and I met, one of the things that used to help sell DVD and then Blu-ray later on was the fact that you got it in widescreen. So VHS originally was full screen, so you didn't have any more pan and scan. So suddenly you saw the whole image as it was projected in the cinema, by and large. Secondly, you had the fact that because it was digital, yes, it was heavily compressed, but never compared to what we'd seen in VHS. There was more detail, there was more precision, and the colors were better, and consistency as well. And I'll never forget someone once saying that a good DVD was like seeing the film for the first time after they've just produced the first 35mm print out of the chemical lab. You're running it on a brand new projector in a brand new cinema with a new screen that's completely clean, and the bulb is brand new and hasn't worn out, and the lens is brand new and hasn't been scratched or got dust on it. It's like that. And then when you suddenly take into account all those variables in how we used to see film, and you suddenly see that we're actually starting to either remove these or flatten these out of the process. That's where we are with UHD now. UHD is that much better and more precise and more visually interesting, but it's really, does it replicate or improve on our original experience? And most of the arguments that are happening amongst cinephiles around all of this remastering stuff, particularly since a lot of this remastering has to happen for streaming, right? Like, even though it's been, just over 10 years since I left the business, even when I left, like, Netflix was blowing up, everyone was going into streaming, and people like Amazon were ripping DVDs at the time to put them up, and like the quality was awful. Whereas Netflix were like, we will not take anything unless you have a 4K master. Like, we need it at the top level. We just don't care what work that means for you as a distributor, but we're not licensing it until you give it to us at the best level, and then we can compress down from there. And that's part of what has driven the 4K UHD revolution, is streamers going, we want this. The fun part, as we said on an episode earlier this week, where we were talking about, Dev, you were talking about streaming and its problems, is that Disney last year, of course, suddenly realizing how much money they are losing, has literally switched from stopping doing all physical media, which it had literally announced in Australia and we're going to roll out over the rest of the world in this year. They have completely reversed that. And now suddenly we're seeing discs, and Marvel series are suddenly out on disc, which they said would never happen. And because this is going to be the only thing that keeps some of these companies afloat is physical.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And this is why I'm hoping, you see, part of the David, you'll get this because of course you're into extras. When Dev asked me to do this, it took me 3 months to kind of go, okay, yeah, I'll do it, because I wasn't sure. Because I suddenly thought to myself, what I really want to do here is I want someone to tap us to do the commentary on a special edition for the film. Like, if anyone should do it now, it's got to be us. Come on. This film, we can just take what we've done and go, and we're done. Because this film needs a special edition. This film needs extras. It needs interviews. We need to find George Armitage because he's still around. We need to find Cusack, Piven, other Cusacks. It needs a location, on location now where we hold up the photo, and this stuff that people do on other discs.
It's so depressing because I when he called me up to do this, I've only got it on DVD, so I thought, oh, this might be a good excuse to upgrade. Let's have a look. But I looked, and it's not worth upgrading. Nope. This Blu-ray's terrible. It's like,
and the Blu-ray it's the same master even as the VHS.
Oh, really?
It's a terrible master. It's freaking awful.
Yeah. And I'm not the kind of guy that usually obsesses over image quality on a good film, especially, right? If the film is good enough, I'm in on the story and I'll enjoy the story and not worry about it. This film, it's still painful, right? That cyclist coming down the street at the very beginning of this film, that shot it's so horrifically bad, to the point
just
of taking out of the film.
Oversaturated.
Oversaturated, grainy,
fuzzy.
over magnified.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably an issue with the actual original camera, right? I'm not sure you're going to be able to do too much to clean that one up, but you could at least
you'd be surprised. Yeah.
Try,
Yeah.
But this
need
is
to
the point,
nudge some of my contacts.
Well, I think but this is the thing, right? It's a Disney license now because they bought Fox, but also back then it was Hollywood Features, which was under the Disney thing because it was under Touchstone, so it's all folded in to Disney, and now it'll be a matter of whether they think it's worth it. And I think what they'll do is they won't look at previous sales and they won't look at previous discs. They'll look at streams on Disney Plus, how many people have streamed it.
Yeah. And
they'll make the decision on that. And of course, we all know that that's not an accurate predictor for who might buy physical media these days. So I think we're a long way out from seeing, because Disney refuses point blank to sub-license to anybody. I think the closest we've got to it is the one Pixar Criterion disc, which is WALL-E, and that's only because of the director himself insisting that he'd be allowed to take it to Criterion, and even then most of it is the stuff that was on the Disney disc. So I feel like it would be nice. I mean, this is like on my holy grail, right? I want a 4K UHD remaster from the OCN of Grosse Pointe Blank, and I want every possible extra, and we need to be on it, damn it.
I mean,
you can film us, David. You do the extra.
I also want to see it for a bunch of other Hollywood Pictures films, right? There's a whole bunch of them, and none of them that I can think of have really received that much love, right? Like, a new version of Dead Presidents would be incredible.
My God, that's the one that so many people want, right? Because there's all these extra scenes that were on the Laserdisc and that have just vanished, and it's basically there was a director's cut doesn't seem to have survived. So if we can get the Hughes brothers in to talk about it, put it together again, I mean, my God, I would kill to see it all put together again. A Dead President's, that's
Arachnophobia.
You're right.
That's an old childhood favorite. So I'm just looking at the list now. Wow.
It's quite a list, isn't it?
It just brings me back to watching this whole list. It's like I rented almost all of these films.
Exactly. We're all in the same boat. And that's it for today's episode of Talking Blu-rays on.
Sorry guys.
No, I mean we're all completely obsessed about this stuff, right? That's why we do this. So
and this is literally why we're doing it. It's literally why we're doing this podcast. We want an extra version of Grosse Pointe Blank. But back to this moment in the film and the discovery of, like we've been saying before on our previous episodes, both with David and with other guests, that nobody in Grosse Pointe believes Martin when he says, "I'm a hitman."
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, I don't.
Is this any different?
He doesn't quite. The minute ends like just before you kind of get the full reaction, but yeah,
it doesn't until the reunion, right? Like he's
okay.
Everybody is like, Martin's just being eccentric here, right? Like he's just making sure, because that's what you would do, right? This is somebody you grew up with, and you're like, but anybody you ask, you're just like, yeah, no, I'm a hitman. And you can do it as straight faced as you like. Nobody's going to be like, of course you are. Everybody's going to be like, all right, fine. You don't want to tell us what you want to do. That's what you're doing. That's cool. And I think that's the response everybody has, and the jesting and the polished, language, and do you get dental with that? Like, is it an open market, or do you have to do postgraduate work? Like, it's all just, riffs on this same thing of like, of course you do that.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I think is like, this is, as he says, this is his, it was his best friend, other than Debbie, I guess, and it's he's more concerned in letting out his own emotions at this point. He's not really interested in what Martin's been doing. He just wants a good reason to be angry about the fact that he hasn't seen Martin in 10 years, really.
Yeah.
It just feel. Am I right in thinking? I'm trying to remember now. You guys will know better. Is this the first time that Martin started? Because he rushes it, but he kind of explains what happened and why he left. Because he says how he's freaked out, and
yes,
because it also feels like a bit of a release for Martin in this scene.
Absolutely, yeah, very much.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of drifting into the next minute, but I mean, I definitely agree with that, and he's getting this release, and then he kind of gets a little bit frustrated because it twigs that nobody actually believes when he says these things, and everybody thinks that he's just being a bit weird. So yeah, I think there's definitely that emotion going on there, especially after, in this minute, he's just sat there listening to Paul talk about all of the like petty family dramas that have been going on, and Martin hasn't even been aware of the family dramas that have been happening on his side, right? Those have all happened in the background.
I mean, in the minute we're in, it's just so much of what Paul's saying about his family, his response to Martin making small talk, is you realize that none of this is small. Big things have happened for them while he's been away, and it comes back to what we've been saying in these previous episodes about everything changing while Martin's away. Parents divorced, brother in prison. Like, this is big stuff. And Martin has literally just gone, yeah, I don't care about any of this stuff. I'm out doing my own thing for me. And, is this what happened to you, kind of thing. And you can see Martin slightly taken aback by it, which is why it's so well timed when Piven's just like, yeah, that classic Jeremy Piven losing the temper moment is so good. It's so well done in it. And Martin looks so shocked when it happens. I keep wondering, is he shocked because it's happening, or is he shocked because Paul's driving and he doesn't want to be in a car crash? Because with Martin, it could be either. 10 years, man. 10. It's one of the best lines in the film. The delivery is just perfection. That's what it's all about. 10 years of life apart. Somebody you thought you knew. It's just not the same anymore. I mean, and again, the entire conversation is shot from Piven's side of the car. We're literally on his side.
Yeah, this whole minute is one shot.
Yeah. We're literally on his side. Martin's just sitting there, like trying to explain, but he's behind the arm. He's behind Piven. It's almost like Piven's arm is holding him in. It's almost like you're back with us now, kind of thing. So once again, lovely framing, lovely composition.
Yeah, this really feels like the first moment when they're ramping up to that reunion as well, right?
Yes.
Like, the spliff gets lit up, and it's just like, I'm going back to like what I was doing in high school, kind of a thing, and embracing that, and Martin's back, and we're going to celebrate that as part of it.
It's definitely more pointed and even sharper in some ways than what just happened with Debi. Right? Yeah. The encounter with Debi felt, sharp, shameful, embarrassing. Everything's happening at once. But the anger here is just so intense. It's very much that blokey male friendship thing.
Yeah.
This is about a very different kind of betrayal.
Yeah.
But they are both, betrayals in both cases, and it's just Martin is completely inadequate in his responses to both of them.
Yeah, there's a lot more tension obviously in these scenes with Debi, whereas here he's starting to, as I say, loosen up, tell his story a bit more. The spliff helps, I imagine.
Yeah, it says a lot that this is what it took.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Yeah, the more I'm watching this scene, the more I notice how long of a cut it is. Like, we've mentioned it previously when there's been slightly longer cuts, that Armitage generally has quite a snap happy view of camera work. He's often cutting back and forth in a fairly restless manner, and so as soon as he doesn't, it's such a telling choice to break from that style, and this, I think this moment really benefits from it, that you've got just this opportunity to just build the relationship, to not like dial in on the back and forth, the tennis match conversation.
Yeah, very much so. And again, I think that comes very much down to the fact that this take is the one where everything is happening. They get it right. They nail it.
Yeah.
I don't think any other version of this scene is probably quite as interesting. And there's certainly no need to cut between two versions of the scene, like with Debi.
Yeah.
In the interview, where very much that feels like the back and forth is partly deliberate for the characters and partly to make use of different takes. Whereas here, very much so, as you say. And that brings us right bang on the minute to one of the best gags, which is where, having admitted to being a hitman, Paul responds with, "Do you have to do postgraduate work for that?" That's one of the best lines ever. As somebody who, I've got a postgraduate degree in terms of teacher training, but that's it. Don't have a master's, don't have a PhD, and I'm just like, but I know so many people who do, and like people who don't ever. I also know people who never finished their postgrad. They just, it just fell apart and they went into work. And there's just something so amusing about the idea of trying to get your head around being a professional hitman or killer. Like, what do you have to do for that? You do extra work. I just love it. I just love the idea there's a postgraduate course in hitman somewhere. Assassination, like probably with like a subunit in like eliminating foreign dignitaries, Although these days they probably just get them to play hitman all the time. That's probably all it is now. It's like, hey, we're cutting down the degrees that don't pay well. Here's a game. Go learn how to shoot people. So good place to end that minute.
This was minute 40 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, Dev Sodiger and Hugh David.
Today's guest was David Brook. David, tell people where you can be found online and for what.
Yeah, so you can check out my reviews that I talked about in length earlier over at blueprintreview.co.uk. And check us out. Through that, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter or X.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. You can find this podcast wherever you're listening to it, as well as on all other good podcast players, as well as a video version on YouTube. You can contact us on X, aka Twitter, and Spotify. In all cases, our handle is at Debi Radio, DEBI Radio. Our website is also debiradio.com. And once again, that's DEBI Radio.
And if you want to join us and talk about the film or films in general or anything else, you can do that on our Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club. And for those of you who are listening to this in real time, just to let you know that we are going to be taking a 2-week hiatus to record some additional episodes. So we haven't gone dead. This isn't abandonware. We're just getting some extra recordings up, and we will be back in 2 weeks' time.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment